What's up everybody, this is Master EN Gamer, and today I'm back with another new hero concept, this time for the Mecha Pilot Overlord. While I already discussed in one of my earlier videos why he's the most likely mecha candidate to join the Overwatch hero roster, today I want to focus on what role he'd play and the kinds of abilities we'd see for him in-game. To be honest, he may have the potential to become one of the game's most unique heroes, which is why I'm excited to get into discussing his kit. And of course, if you end up enjoying this video, then be sure to like, sub, and hit the bell for more future Overwatch content. Now, when it comes to Overlord, there are two prominent features which stick out regarding his mech, which are that it's 100% airborne, as we can see from it hovering when being stored in the mecha base, and the drones, which seem to be its primary utility. To start, let's look at the drones. He appears to have 4 small drones positioned on the rear wing of his mech. Considering the game's technical limitations on having drones, I really doubt he'll be able to have more than about 4 active at a time. I talked in a previous video of mine about the base mechanics of drones in a game like Overwatch, along with their functional possibilities and limitations. I recommend you check that out if you haven't already, so I'll include a card linking to it on screen. However, when it comes to these drones, their use would largely depend on Overlord's role as a hero, being DPS, tank, or support. While there was quite a bit of debate in the comments over this aspect of him in my mecha analysis video, I have to say that he will most likely be a tank hero. The first main reason for this is simply his size. While being tied with D.Va for having the smallest mech in the mecha squad, this would still make him one of the largest heroes on the Overwatch roster. While size isn't purely indicative of class, his overall appearance does make him seem more like an off-tank than a straight-up DPS. Some people have suggested that he could possibly be a support hero of some kind, but I'm not necessarily convinced. Unlike the other healers in the game who largely feature the color yellow, which is the game's color for healing, Overlord's mech is blue. While Ana is a healer whose color scheme features blue instead of yellow, she is a very specifically designed exception, which would be way too off topic to get into explaining in this video. However, while presumably not a healer, the mech does maintain a relatively passive appearance. It looks like something that would play a more supportive role than offensive. Considering the color blue, especially the 2 separate tones of blue seen on the drones themselves, I believe his drones may be able to provide shields. This would presumably work like Symmetra's ability from back in the day, where the drone can essentially provide bonus shield health. The shields would only remain on the targeted ally for as long as the drone was tasked to follow them, meaning that the bonus shields would be removed if the drone was recalled, reassigned, or destroyed. This would offer some level of management strategy while playing Overlord, as you would have to prioritize whom to vicariously shield depending on the situation and how many drones you have available. Granting teammates shields like this would again suggest placing Overlord in the tank category, as since Symmetra's expulsion, all support heroes have now become healers. In addition to the shield drones, Overlord would also have a second drone type, this one being more focused on dealing damage. Like Zen's Discord Orb, you may be able to assign one of these DPS drones to an enemy, which it'll then follow and deal damage to until either the drone or the target is killed. The damage output will be low, but could be quite useful for warding off flankers who might be trying to pick off your team's support. The flanker would need to either attack the drone, thus wasting precious time in your backline and giving away their position, or attempt to just tank the damage while pursuing their own target. Having 2 types of functionally different drones would be a great way to expand on the management aspect of playing Overlord, especially if you can only have a set number of total drones deployed at one time, thus forcing you to determine whether to use them more offensively or defensively. This will be very similar to Moira's 2 kinds of orbs, and may even work the same as an ability where you first activate the drone and then choose which one to deploy. The drones themselves would have to be killable by the enemy, and likely would be akin to Symmetra's turrets with regards to how they're deployed. You would have a set number ready to use in your inventory, likely the same amount as can be active simultaneously, and then there is a cooldown to restock them for redeployment. Deploying a new drone when you already have the max number out will cause the oldest active drone to deactivate. However, Overlord may also be able to recall active drones, thus allowing the player to more strategically manage them. Doing this would also re-add that drone to your inventory, meaning it can then be deployed again without having to wait for the cooldown. Overall, the drones could be seen as a cross between Zenyatta and Symmetra's abilities. Like Zen's orbs, you would need line of sight to first assign a drone to an ally or enemy, but then it likely wouldn't need to maintain line of sight afterwards in order to stay active. This is compensated by the fact that the drones themselves can be destroyed, and they would likely require line of sight in order to be recalled called for reassignment. This aspect of assigning and reassigning drones may sound a bit micromanagey, but that could actually play into Overlord's overarching design, which I'll discuss more towards the end of this video. However, let's get to the second major component of his kit, which is flight. Now again, when I say flight, I mean true unlimited airborne potential. Not limited flight like Pharah or D.Va, but more like what Mercy has during Valkyrie. I will admit that this could be extremely powerful, but not necessarily OP if the rest of his kit was balanced appropriately. His flight and high mobility could be offset by a relatively low overall health pool for a tank, possibly only being around 300 or 400 total HP. He'd undoubtedly be an easy target for snipers and hit scans while flying, which would give him the same sort of counters as Pharah and force him to need to be more careful with his positioning. Another thing to note is the position of his head hitbox. While it makes sense for the cockpit to be the critical spot on his mech, the fact that his is located on the top of the mech instead of the front would make it incredibly difficult to hit, especially if he's constantly airborne. Therefore, he may have an additional critical spot on his mech's wings, right here where we see the propulsion systems. This could allow him to be headshot more easily from the ground, and having these two weak spots in addition to his cockpit would make him much easier to counter, which would be important for a hero with this amount of extreme mobility. Shifting back to the pros and cons of being able to fly, perhaps the biggest issue I see with an ability like this is that players would just fly up to a high corner of a map and camp there the entire match. They wouldn't be able to contest, but they'd still be able to spam drones at people, which would likely end up feeling unenjoyable for all parties involved. So in order to prevent something like this, he'd likely have a set range from which he can actually assign his drones. This would force him to remain at least relatively close to the action in order to use his abilities. And if this still isn't balanced enough, then he may also have a range limitation on his drones after they're deployed. Straying too far from his active drones would cause them to deactivate, thus further adding to the importance of having good positioning and map awareness while playing him. Another major issue with permaflight would be how it controls for the player. I assume it would be the same as Mercy during her ultimate, where you hold jump and crouch to ascend and descend, and then navigate horizontally using the normal movement controls. Aiming up or down will allow you to move in that direction, and not inputting any movement directions would result in Overlord just hovering in place. In this case then, flight would more so be a passive as opposed to an actual ability. Perhaps he could get an omnidirectional boost ability like Hanzo's Lunge, which allows him to quickly shift while midair to either dodge behind cover or close in on an enemy target. Overall, I'm not really a big fan of these kind of flight controls, but I don't expect Blizzard to implement their own Overwatch flight simulator just for one hero. Also, there's an issue of trying to navigate doorways and corridors. Given that his wingspan is only slightly wider than D.Va's mech, I don't think there'd be too much issue with being able to fit, but having to sort of swoop down to go through narrow hallways could feel kinda wonky. Also, it would probably look absurd to have this thing trying to fly around tight locations. This could factor into him having varying strength on different maps, as he'd almost certainly work better somewhere open like Junkertown versus Horizon Lunar Colony. Again though, while the issues of size and flight are existent, I don't believe them to be so extreme that Blizzard couldn't find a way of working around them. Looking at the other parts of his kit, his primary fire would definitely be this main gun we see on the front of his mech. This could function in a number of different ways, and its use would likely depend largely on his drone and flight abilities. It might have steep fall-off damage, thus further encouraging the player to not just camp out at the top of the sky all match, and I strongly suspect it'd be comparable to Wrecking Ball's primary fire, where it's useful, but not really the primary focus of his kit. Also, the two arms which stick out the front of his mech are almost certainly there so he can melee punch. I mean, I see no other use for them, nor do I see any other way for him to melee outside of just body slamming. This now brings us to his ultimate ability, which unfortunately is the part of his kit which I'm least certain about. Looking at the other tank ultimates, they're all forms of crowd control, area denial, or both. I feel that his would fall into the category of area denial, much like D.Va's, although I'm not sure having him self-destruct just like her would be particularly interesting. In fact, I'm also not convinced that he'd have an ejected pilot form, as his mech seems to lack the same easy eject hatch that's on D.Va's, and the fact that we see him being helped out of his wrecked mech in the short makes me even more assured of this. Besides, 2 ejection-capable heroes seems a bit excessive for how gimmicky of a mechanic it really is. Regarding the ultimate though, I don't know, maybe he'd make use of his flight ability and he'd carpet bomb a specific area. The bombs themselves would be self-destructing drones which just fly downwards and explode on impact. impact. It'd kinda be a hybrid between Wrecking Ball's mines and Pharah's rocket barrage. It'd do a lot of damage, but takes a bit of time for all the bombs to fall, thus functioning more as a zoning ultimate instead of a straight up damage dealing one. If I ever revisit this Overlord hero concept, I'd like to focus more on fine tuning his ultimate, but for the time being, I think carpet bombing would work well with the kit I've proposed. Overall, he'd be a hero who doesn't require extreme mechanical skill, but has loads of potential when it comes to game sense and map awareness. Depending on how his drones function, he could even feel akin to playing an RTS, complete with the pseudo-overhead view of the battlefield from his airborne mech and the micromanaging of multiple units. This would even strongly tie in with what little we know of his lore, since Overlord is a rather obvious reference to the StarCraft Zerg unit of the same name. While Overlord specifically hasn't been revealed to be a former pro gamer like D.Va, Demon, and King, the reference in his name makes it seem likely. Who knows, perhaps he adopted the StarCraft Pro status which was once attributed to D.Va. Maybe Blizzard's intent to add him as a hero was the real reason D.Va's backstory got retconned. Regardless, I think Overlord has a lot of potential to be a future hero, and while these abilities I've proposed certainly would need a lot of fine tuning, I think they are absolutely viable. Also, I haven't delved into the specifics of things like health and damage output for him and his drones, since those seem like minor aspects which can't be accurately pinned down until the hero itself has been actually designed and tested. But anyways, let me know your thoughts on this Overlord hero concept by leaving a comment down below. As I said, this is by no means a complete hero, so I'd love to hear your own ideas for how he might work. If you enjoyed this video, then leave a like and share it with a friend if you really liked it. Subscribe and hit the bell to keep up with all my future Overwatch content, and follow me on Twitter for even more updates. This is Master EN Gamer signing off, and until next time, have a great day.